James Corbin never imagined he would end up on a ship full of aliens. Back on Earth, he had been an ordinary man, a quiet mechanic from a small, dusty town in Colorado. He liked simple things, fixing engines, drinking strong coffee, and watching the sunset fade behind the mountains. He was not a soldier, not a hero, just someone who understood machines better than he understood people. But life had a strange way of changing directions. When the Union Treaty was signed between Earth and the Galactic Council, humans were finally allowed to serve aboard alien ships. The idea was to promote unity, understanding, and shared knowledge among species. For James, it was a chance to escape the smallness of his old life, a chance to see the stars he'd only ever dreamed about. And so, a few months later, he found himself aboard the USS Horizon, a vast exploration ship that carried beings from 7 different worlds. From the first moment, it was overwhelming. The corridors glowed with soft blue light that seemed to breathe. The air smelled faintly metallic and sweet. The walls hummed with a low vibration like a heartbeat. Everywhere he looked, there were creatures that looked like something out of a dream or a nightmare. There were Tharkin, tall, insect-like beings with translucent wings. Duralans, who looked half made of crystal, their skin refracting the light into tiny rainbows. And of course the Zenthari, who everyone whispered were the most advanced species in the known galaxy. Among them was Talira. She was a Zenthari communications officer, tall, slender, with silver-blue skin that shimmered under the ship's lighting. Her eyes were large and bright, with shifting colors that looked like swirling galaxies. She moved with quiet grace, every motion precise, every word deliberate. The first time James saw her, she was standing by the communication console, hands hovering over glowing symbols that changed shape as she spoke. Her voice was calm, melodic like music wrapped in thought. He didn't understand a single thing she was saying, but something about her tone made him stop and listen anyway. She noticed him watching. Instead of frowning or looking away, she smiled. Just a small one, polite, distant, but it was enough to make his heart skip. Over the following weeks, James got used to the alien ways of the Horizon. He learned how to read the ship's alien controls, how to eat food that shimmered and moved slightly on its own, how to nod politely when someone from another world spoke about things he didn't understand. But every time he passed the communications bay, he would slow down just a little. Just enough to glance inside, just enough to see her. He didn't know what drew him to her. Maybe it was the way she seemed so calm while everything around them was strange. Maybe it was how she listened to others with a quiet patience that few humans had. Or maybe it was simply that in a ship full of aliens, she was the one who made him feel less alone. One day, during a maintenance shift, the Horizon's power grid malfunctioned. Half the ship lost lighting and communications flickered. James and his team rushed to repair it. That was the first time he spoke directly to Talira. She appeared beside him, holding a glowing tool that pulsed with blue light. "Human engineer," she said, voice soft but firm. "The grid is unstable. Allow me to assist." He blinked, surprised that she knew his name. Sure, thanks." She knelt beside him, and for the next few minutes they worked in silence. He tried not to stare, but curiosity got the better of him. Her hands moved with impossible precision. She didn't just repair, she understood. When the lights finally flickered back on, she looked at him. "Your methods are primitive but effective," she said gently. He chuckled. "Yeah, that's humans for you. We make it work somehow." To his surprise, she laughed, a soft musical sound that filled the silent bay. Something changed that day. After that, she would greet him when they passed in the corridors. Sometimes she'd ask about Earth, its oceans, its animals, its strange habit of having wars, and then writing songs about peace. He tried to explain it all in words she might understand, but most of the time, he just ended up smiling awkwardly. And she would tilt her head in that curious way she had, as if trying to decode not his words, but him. In the quiet of deep space, among stars that burned brighter than anything he'd ever seen, James Corbin began to realize something. It wasn't the stars he was falling in love with, it was her. Weeks passed aboard the USS Horizon, and life among aliens slowly began to feel normal. James Corbin learned the strange rhythms of the ship. How the lights dimmed every 36 hours to mark rest phase. How the food replicators occasionally produced something that wriggled before it cooled. How the air sometimes smelled faintly of ozone after a warp jump. And through it all, there was her, Talira. He never meant to get close to her. He knew the rules. Humans and Xanthari didn't mix. Their biology was different, their cultures worlds apart. The Xanthari believed emotion was a distraction, something that clouded logic and judgment. They were thinkers, not feelers, but even so, he couldn't help it. They saw each other more often now, sometimes by accident, sometimes because one of them made an excuse to pass through the other section of the ship. James started fixing things that didn't really need fixing, just so he could talk to her for a few extra minutes. At first, their conversations were short, simple exchanges about work, energy outputs, or signal calibrations. But then they began to talk about other things. He told her about Earth, about green fields and thunder, about the smell of rain and the sound of a guitar at night. She listened with quiet fascination, eyes shimmering with reflected starlight. In return, she told him about Xanthar, her home world. A place of silver skies and oceans that glowed in the dark. Her people communicated through light and tone, their voices blending into beautiful harmonies. To her, emotion was expressed through color, not words. One night, while the ship drifted in silent orbit above a barren moon, James found her alone in the observation deck. The room was bathed in the soft blue of distant starlight. He hesitated at the door. "You always come here when the lights are low," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "I come to listen," she replied. "The stars sing. If one is still enough, one can hear them." He smiled and stepped closer. "Humans just call that silence." She glanced at him then, her expression soft. "You humans are too loud to hear it." He laughed quietly, rubbing the back of his neck. "You're probably right." There was a long pause, the kind that stretched comfortably between two people who didn't need to fill it. Then from somewhere deep within the ship, a soft vibration hummed through the floor, the gentle pulse of the horizon's core. Talara reached into the folds of her uniform and pulled out a small, glowing crystal. It shimmered faintly in her hand. "What's that?" he asked. "A thought stone," she said. "It holds memory, a piece of what one has seen or felt. When one shares it, they share a fragment of their essence." She extended her hand. "You may keep it if you wish." James blinked, unsure. I can't take that. It looks important." "It is," she said simply. "That is why I offer it." He took it carefully, his fingers brushing against hers. The moment they touched, a warmth spread through his skin. Not heat, but something deeper, something alive. Suddenly, he saw flashes in his mind, soft light, silver oceans. 1,000 stars seen through alien eyes. For a brief instant, he felt her memories, her emotions, her loneliness. Then it faded, leaving him breathless. "Talara," he whispered. "That was memory," she said softly. "A gift. Few have ever received one from a Xanthari." He held the glowing stone close, unsure what to say. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. "I'll take care of it. I know you will." Her voice was calm, but her eyes, those shifting, endless eyes, held something else, something unspoken. After that night, something changed between them. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. He caught her looking at him when she thought he wasn't watching. And sometimes, when their hands brushed, the air between them seemed to hum. But not everyone approved. A few crew members whispered behind his back. A Tharkan engineer warned him quietly one day. "Careful, human. The Xanthari do not love. They observe. When they touch you, it is curiosity, not affection." James only smiled. "Maybe. But I'll take curiosity over indifference." Still, the warning lingered in his mind. He knew the risks. He knew it wasn't supposed to happen. Humans and Xanthari could never truly understand each other. Their hearts didn't even beat the same way. Yet when he looked into her eyes, all those reasons faded away. Because somehow, in that vast, cold universe with stars burning and dying in silence, two souls, one human, one alien, had begun to orbit each other, a bond that shouldn't exist. A connection that defied every law of logic, biology, and duty. And though neither of them would say it aloud, they both knew the truth. Something fragile, something dangerous, something real had begun to grow between them. The USS Horizon had been drifting through calm space for months. Every mission was routine, mapping stars, studying signals, exploring quiet corners of the galaxy where no one had ever been. But peace never lasts. It began as whispers through the ship's communication network, intercepted messages, strange movements in border space. Then one day the whispers became screams. The Dravans had returned. The Dravans were a nightmare made of metal and hunger, a race of insectoid creatures who devoured entire worlds to fuel their hives. They didn't trade, didn't speak, didn't reason. They only consumed. And now they were attacking the Zenthari homeworld. The moment the message came through, Talera's calm eyes flickered with something James had never seen before. Fear. Not for herself, but for her people. The Dravens have breached the outer colonies, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. Millions will perish if the fleet does not intervene. The Horizon received orders the next day. All hands to battle stations. The ship's mission of exploration was over. Now it was a vessel of war. For James, everything changed overnight. The hallways that once hummed with peaceful conversation were now filled with the rush of soldiers and the heavy smell of fuel. The sound of alarms became as familiar as his own heartbeat. Talera no longer met him in the observation deck. She was constantly at her station, relaying messages between ships, coordinating distress calls. He saw her only in brief passing moments, her face pale, her eyes sharp and distant. Sometimes she didn't even notice him, and that hurt more than he wanted to admit. The first battle came near the moon of Raynor 9. The Horizon arrived to find the remains of 3 Zenthari cruisers floating in silence. The stars were filled with wreckage and drifting bodies. James had never seen war before. He thought he was prepared. He wasn't. The ship shook violently as energy blasts tore through the hull. He heard screams over the comms, saw sparks raining from broken consoles, smelled burning metal and ozone. Through it all, he worked, patching circuits, sealing doors, fighting to keep the engines alive. And in every second of chaos, one thought kept him moving. Talera is still on this ship. When the battle finally ended, half the fleet was gone. The Dravans had pulled back, for now. The Horizon floated among the debris, her engines wounded, her crew exhausted. James found Talera in the dim glow of the communications bay, surrounded by static and broken screens. Her hands were trembling as she tried to stabilize a damaged relay. Without a word, he stepped beside her and helped. For a while, they worked in silence. 2 people trying to hold together a ship that was falling apart. When the last console flickered back to life, she finally spoke. "Your species. You are strange," she said quietly. "How so?" he asked, his voice tired but gentle. "You run toward death and still you hope. You grieve, yet you laugh. I do not understand it." James leaned against the console, looking out at the broken field of ships. "We don't understand it either. We just do what we can. Hope's all we've got." She looked at him for a long moment. "Hope," she repeated softly as if testing the word. "Perhaps that is your greatest weapon." A silence stretched between them, heavy with loss. Then she asked in a whisper barely audible, "If we die, human, what will you remember?" He met her eyes. "That I met someone who made the stars feel closer." For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then she looked away, but he thought, just for a second, that her lips curved into the faintest, saddest smile. The days that followed were a blur. The war deepened. The Dravens spread across the sector like wildfire. Each jump brought new battles, new losses, new names added to the casualty lists. James stopped sleeping much. He lived on caffeine and adrenaline. Sometimes he'd stare out the viewport, watching distant fires flicker in the void, and wonder how much more the galaxy could take. And through it all, Talera kept working, tireless, calm, but he saw the exhaustion in her movements, the way her voice cracked when she thought no one was listening. Once, during a brief moment of rest, he caught her staring at the small crystal she'd given him, the thoughtstone that now hung from his neck. She didn't say anything, just nodded slightly as if to say, "Keep it close," and he did. Because deep down, James knew something he couldn't bring himself to say out loud. War changes everything. And even love, fragile as it was, might not survive what was coming next. The war dragged on. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The USS Horizon was no longer the shining vessel of exploration it once was. Its hull was scarred, its lights dim, and its crew hollow-eyed from endless battles. James Corbin worked longer hours than ever before. His hands were always stained with oil and burns from engine repairs. Sleep became a stranger. The sound of alarms and gunfire was constant, echoing through his dreams even when he managed to rest. But even in the chaos, one thing never changed. He always looked for her, Talera. No matter how tired he was, how broken the ship felt, he found himself glancing toward the communications deck. just to see if she was still there. Still standing, still breathing. Sometimes their eyes met through the glass partition that separated their work zones. They never spoke much during battle days, but that single look was enough. A quiet reminder that they were both still alive. When the war reached the Zenthari home system, the Horizon was ordered to join the final defense fleet. It was said to be the last stand, one last attempt to push the Dravens back before everything was lost. The night before the battle, the ship drifted in silent orbit around a dying sun. The crew was exhausted, quiet, too afraid to hope. Some wrote final messages to their families. Others prayed to whatever gods they believed in. James didn't pray. He went looking for her. He found Talera in the observation deck again, just like before. The stars outside were dull, swallowed by the dust of war. She stood motionless, her hands folded behind her back, her reflection faint in the glass. For a while, he just watched her. There was something about her calmness, and it wasn't peace. It was acceptance, as if she already knew what tomorrow would bring. Finally, he spoke. "You should get some rest." She didn't turn around. "Zenthari do not rest when there is duty." He sighed softly, stepping beside her. "Yeah, well, humans do, even if it's just to pretend everything's okay for a little while." That made her look at him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, shades of blue and violet swirling like smoke. "Pretending does not change reality." "No," he said quietly. "But sometimes it helps you survive it." They stood side by side, the silence between them heavy and fragile. Outside, distant ships drifted like ghosts against the void. He wanted to say something and needed to. The words had been burning inside him for weeks, and if tomorrow really was the end, he couldn't leave them unsaid. His throat tightened, but he forced the words out anyway. "Talera," he began, voice rough. "There's something I need to ask you." She turned fully toward him now, her head tilting slightly. "Ask." He swallowed hard, heart pounding in his chest. "I know this isn't right. I know your people see emotion as dangerous, but I can't stop what I feel. You've been the only thing that's made this war bearable. You've kept me human when everything else tried to take that away." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes flickered. "I care about you," he continued, "more than I should. And I just—" He hesitated, afraid of how foolish it might sound. "I need to know if you feel anything like that for me." The words hung in the air, fragile and trembling. The hum of the ship filled the silence between them. Talera stood still. Her gaze dropped for a moment, then rose again, searching his face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Human emotion. It is chaos," she said. "It burns, it blinds. It consumes logic. My people fear it because it can destroy what we are." James nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said softly, "it can. But it also makes life worth living." She stared at him for a long time. The stars outside flickered across her silver-blue skin. Finally, she stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the faint hum of energy radiating from her. Her hand lifted slightly, trembling, as if unsure whether it should move or stay still. Then, slowly, she reached out and touched his face. Her fingers were cool, smooth, and glowing faintly where they met his skin. "I do not understand this feeling," she whispered. "But when you are near, I feel different. My thoughts are not quiet, my pulse is not still. And when I imagine a universe without your presence, it feels empty." James felt his chest tighten. He covered her hand with his own, holding it gently. "That's what humans call love," he said quietly. For a heartbeat, she said nothing. Then her lips curved into the smallest, saddest smile. "Then I suppose," she murmured, "I love you." They stood like that, suspended between two worlds, between war and peace, between fear and hope, two beings from different stars, bound by something neither of them fully understood. Outside, the alarms began to sound, the signal for battle stations. The moment was over, stolen by war. But as Talera turned to leave, she glanced back at him and said softly, "Do not die tomorrow, James Corbin." He smiled, despite the ache in his heart. "Only if you don't." And then she was gone, leaving him alone with the sound of distant thunder, and a single thought that echoed in his chest. If this was the end, it had been worth every second. The next morning, the USS Horizon woke to the sound of war. The alarm screamed through the corridors, red lights flashing across the ship's metal walls. The crew moved fast, running, shouting, strapping in. The final battle for the Zenthari homeworld had begun. James Corbin barely had time to think. His hands worked on instinct, checking the engines, sealing the coolant lines, resetting the damaged systems from the last skirmish. The ship vibrated under his feet as the cannons fired again and again. The horizon was fighting for its life. Outside, through the narrow window near the engine deck, he could see the stars flashing with bursts of blue and red. Whole ships exploded like dying suns. The Dravens were everywhere, black, sharp, endless. Their swarm covered the horizon like a moving shadow, and somewhere on the upper deck, Talera was still there, calm, steady, fighting with words and signals instead of weapons. He wanted to go to her, but he couldn't leave his post. The captain's voice echoed through the comms, shouting orders. The crew was holding the line, but the Dravens kept coming. Hours passed like minutes. The ship shook violently with every hit. James could taste metal in the air. His muscles burned from exhaustion. He didn't even realize he was bleeding from a cut on his forehead until someone pointed it out. Then, silence. The ship stopped firing. The alarms dimmed. For a few terrifying seconds, the horizon floated quietly among the burning wrecks of what had once been a fleet. "We've lost the defense line," someone whispered. James's heart dropped. He ran toward the communication deck, ignoring the smoke and the broken panels around him. The moment he reached the door, it opened, and there she was. Talera, still at her station, surrounded by flickering lights and broken screens. Her silver blue skin was dim now, her eyes tired. But she was alive. "Are you all right?" he gasped, stepping closer. She looked up at him and nodded slowly. "The signal to the Zenthari command must not be lost. I am stabilizing the transmission." "You've been at it for hours," he said. "You need rest." "There is no time," she interrupted softly. "If the message fails, my world falls." He hesitated, looking at her, at the soft tremble in her hands, the way her voice cracked when she spoke. For the first time, she didn't look like the perfect, calm alien officer. She looked human, fragile, afraid. He reached out and touched her arm gently. "You can't save everyone, Talera." Her eyes flicked up to meet his, and for a long moment they just stared at each other. The chaos outside felt far away, fading into silence. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, a whisper meant only for him. "Last night, when you asked what I feel," she began, "I was afraid. My people do not allow emotion to rule us. We are trained from birth to silence it. But when you spoke, when I looked at you, something inside me broke free." James said nothing. He couldn't. His chest felt tight, his throat dry. She continued, "You make me question what I am. You make me feel, and it terrifies me." Her hand trembled as she reached for something around her neck, a small glowing stone, brighter than the one she'd given him before. She held it between them. "This is my life core, James Corbin," she said. "It carries my memory and essence. If I fall, it will keep a part of me alive." He shook his head. "Don't talk like that. You're not going anywhere." But she only smiled, that same soft, sad smile that broke his heart every time. "Hope," she whispered. "That is your gift, human. And your curse." Then the deck shook violently. Sparks flew from the ceiling. A voice shouted over the comms, "The Dravens are boarding! All personnel, prepare for impact." James grabbed her hand. "We have to go." She pulled free gently, her eyes glowing with resolve. "I must finish the transmission." "No," he said firmly, voice shaking. "We'll find another way." Her eyes softened. "James, remember what you said? That love makes life worth living?" He nodded, struggling to breathe. She leaned close, her forehead resting briefly against his, a Zenthari gesture of deep connection. "Then let it make dying worth it too." Before he could speak, she pressed the glowing stone into his hand. It pulsed once, warm, alive. "Talera," he started, but it was too late. She turned back to her station, hands flying over the controls. The communication core around her began to overload, light flooding the room in blinding waves. James shouted her name, but the roar drowned everything out. A final burst of light filled the air, and then silence. When he opened his eyes, the deck was destroyed. Smoke filled the air. The communication array was gone, burned out completely, and Talera was nowhere to be seen. He dropped to his knees, the glowing stone still warm in his palm. His chest ached with a pain too deep for words, but then, through the silence, the main console flickered. The signal had gone through. She had done it. Talira had saved her world, and James Corbin, covered in ash and tears, realized what her final words truly meant. She wasn't afraid of love anymore. She had become it. The USS Horizon floated in darkness. Half of its hull was gone, the engines barely holding together. Smoke filled the air, and the once bright corridors were now twisted metal and shadows. James Corbin sat on the cold floor of the communications bay, staring at the glowing stone in his hands, Talira's life core. It pulsed softly like a heartbeat. Like her, he couldn't feel time anymore. Minutes, hours, and it all blurred together. He didn't remember dragging himself through the wreckage. Didn't remember sealing the bulkheads or rebooting the emergency power. All he could think of was the light that had swallowed her, and the sound of her voice before it vanished. Then let it make dying worth it too. Those words replayed in his head again and again until they didn't sound like words anymore. Just echoes, fading into silence. But Talira's signal had gone through. The message she sent had reached the Xanthari home fleet. Reinforcements were already on their way. Her sacrifice had saved millions. Still, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like the stars themselves had gone quiet. James forced himself to stand. His body ached, but something inside him refused to stop. He made his way to the engine room, the one place that still felt alive. The hum of the power core was faint, weak, but there, like a heartbeat refusing to die. He placed the life core on the console beside him. The light from it reflected off the walls, turning the broken metal soft and silver. "I don't know if you can hear me," he said softly, his voice rough. "But I'm not leaving you here. Not ever." He knew what he had to do. The ship was beyond repair. But if he could stabilize the main drive long enough, he could keep the Horizon from falling into the Draven swarm below. It would buy the Xanthari fleet more time. It would mean Talira's sacrifice hadn't been for nothing. He smiled faintly. "Guess it's my turn." He started working, hands moving on instinct, reconnecting power lines, sealing breaches, rerouting energy. Every movement hurt, but he didn't care. He'd promised her once that humans make things work somehow, and now he would prove it. The ship groaned around him, metal bending under pressure. The temperature rose as the power surged back into the core. He wiped the sweat and blood from his forehead and kept going. At one point, he looked up at the life core again. It flickered, glowing brighter for a moment, almost as if answering him. "Yeah," he said quietly, smiling through the pain. "I know. I miss you too." He could almost hear her voice, soft, melodic, whispering through the hum of the ship. "Do not grieve, human. The stars remember." His chest tightened and tears stung his eyes. "Then remember us both," he whispered. The Horizon trembled violently. Outside, through the shattered viewing port, he could see the Draven ships closing in, black winged monsters tearing through the void. But above them, faint lights appeared in the distance. The Xanthari fleet. Talira's people were coming. James took a deep breath and activated the emergency core override. The control panel glowed red, warning of critical detonation. He had one chance to send the Horizon into the swarm, to take the enemy ships down with it. His hands hovered over the final switch. "You did your part, Talira," he said softly. "Now I'll do mine." He pressed the button. The engines roared to life, flooding the ship with blinding light. Alarms screamed, metal tore, and the Horizon began to dive toward the heart of the Draven fleet. As the power surged, James reached out and picked up the life core, holding it close against his chest. He closed his eyes. "If there's anything after this," he whispered, "I hope I see you there." The explosion that followed lit up the void like a new star being born. For a brief, beautiful moment, the Horizon burned brighter than anything else in the galaxy. And then it was gone. When the Xanthari fleet arrived minutes later, they found only silence. The Draven ships were destroyed, scattered into drifting ashes. The war was over. Among the debris, their sensors picked up something strange. A single piece of crystal, still glowing faintly among the wreckage, a life core. They retrieved it, uncertain of its origin, unaware that within its faint pulse, two voices lingered, one human, one Xanthari, bound together in eternal memory. In the quiet after the storm, the stars shone brighter than before, and somewhere far beyond the reach of war, love had found a way to outlast even death. Because sometimes the greatest victories are not won with weapons, but with hearts brave enough to love across worlds.